The final card slid across the table with a dry scrape, and the laughter died mid-breath. Smoke hung low in the mountain lodge, thick with sweat, cheap whiskey, and the sharp tang of desperation. Lantern light flickered over scarred faces and scarred hands, over knuckles swollen from work and fights long forgotten. No one spoke. They all leaned in, eyes locked on the spread of cards as if the ink might rearrange itself into a different ending. It didn't. The mountain man stared down at the table, not celebrating, not smiling. He hadn't even wanted the hand. He'd played because the night was cold and the cards passed the time. He'd played because men here respected quiet luck more than talk. He hadn't expected to win big. Across from him, the gambler's face drained of color. His fingers trembled as he reached for his glass and missed it entirely. Someone snorted. Someone else muttered a curse. The gambler forced a laugh, loud and brittle, like ice cracking underfoot. "Well," he said, pushing the cards forward, "guess that's that." Behind him, the woman stood still. She had learned how to stand like that, present but unnoticed, spine straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes lowered just enough to avoid provoking anyone. Her dress was clean but worn thin, mended so many times the original fabric barely remained. She kept her hands folded at her waist, fingers laced tightly together, nails bitten short. The room barely registered her as a person. She was an attachment, a possession. The gambler glanced back at her and scoffed. "She's worthless anyway," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Couldn't even earn her keep proper." A few men chuckled. One spat on the floor. The word hit her like a familiar bruise. Worthless. She'd heard it in whispers, in shouts, in moments when silence felt safer than protest. She didn't flinch. Flinching only invited more. The mountain man's jaw tightened. He pushed his chair back and stood slowly, the legs scraping against the wooden floor. The sound cut through the room sharper than any shout. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, beard threaded with gray, eyes that missed very little. He wasn't known for his temper, but when he spoke, people listened. "That's not how cards work," he said. The gambler shrugged, trying to sound careless. "You won. House rules. You take what's on the table." "She's not on the table," the mountain man replied. The gambler leaned back, smile twisting. "Everything I own was." The room went quiet again, heavier this time. The mountain man felt something settle in his chest, something cold and unwelcome. He hadn't come here to take a man's land, or money, or pride. And he sure as hell hadn't come to claim a woman like a horse or a rifle. He looked at her then, really looked. She met his gaze for the first time. There was no pleading in her eyes. No tears. Just a calm steadiness that didn't belong in a place like this. It unsettled him more than fear would have. It was the look of someone who had already survived worse than whatever came next. "You don't belong to him," the mountain man said. The gambler laughed again, harsher this time. "She belongs to whoever holds the cards." The mountain man's fingers curled slowly at his sides. He could walk away. He knew that. He could leave the table, leave the lodge, leave the whole ugly business behind. Men had done worse things in this room and slept just fine afterward. But something about the way she stood there, silent, unbroken, made walking away feel like another kind of theft. "I didn't agree to this," he said. "You played," the gambler snapped. "You won." The mountain man exhaled through his nose. The fire popped in the hearth. Somewhere outside, wind howled down the mountain pass, rattling the shutters. He turned back to the woman. "Do you want to go with him?" The gambler's head whipped around. "You don't get to ask." She answered before the man could finish. "I don't want to go with anyone who thinks he owns me." The room froze. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't shake. It carried anyway. The mountain man felt the moment lock into place, the way fate did when it decided to stop giving choices. He reached for the cards, gathered them slowly, deliberately, and pushed them back across the table. "I won," he said. "But not like that." Then he looked at her again and added, quietly, "If you come with me, it'll be because you choose to." For the first time all night, something flickered across her face. Not hope, recognition. The ride up the mountain was long and steep, the lodge's lantern light shrinking behind them until it disappeared entirely. The night air cut sharp against their faces, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. She sat behind him on the horse, careful to keep her balance without leaning too much into his back, as if any closeness had to be earned. He noticed the distance immediately. It sat heavy in his mind, heavier than the rifle across his shoulder. "You can hold on," he said after a while, not turning. "Trail gets rough." "I'm steady," she replied. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the strain beneath it, the discipline of someone who had learned to endure without complaint. He slowed the horse anyway, adjusting his pace to match her breathing. The mountains loomed dark and watchful, indifferent witnesses to whatever strange bargain fate had just written. When his cabin finally came into view, a single window glowing with firelight, she stiffened. He felt it through the horse before he saw it in her posture. "This is mine," he said gently. "No one else comes this far up." He dismounted first and turned, offering his hand. He didn't grab, didn't rush. He waited. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. Her palm was rougher than he expected, calloused, strong. Not the hands of someone useless. Inside, the cabin was warm and spare. A table, 2 chairs, a bed against the far wall, shelves lined with tools and jars of dried food. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was decorative. He set his rifle aside, hung his coat, and stepped back to give her space. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep by the fire." She studied him, searching for the trick she'd learned always followed kindness. Finding none unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. "That's not necessary," she said carefully. It is, he replied. To me, she nodded once. Again, that quiet acceptance. She sat at the table while he ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of her. The smell made her stomach twist painfully, hunger remembered too suddenly. She ate slowly, deliberately, like someone afraid the food might be taken away if she rushed. He pretended not to watch. He failed. When she finished, she folded her hands again, the same way she had at the lodge. Habit, armor. They called me worthless, she said into the silence. He looked up. I heard. They always do. When someone wants something from you, it helps if they decide you're nothing first. He leaned back in his chair, firelight dancing across his face. You didn't look like nothing. Her lips curved. Not quite a smile. That's because I learned early not to look like what they expect. She reached into the inside seam of her dress, fingers slipping through a hidden stitch. He tensed without meaning to, unsure what she was about to pull free. Slowly, carefully, she drew out a folded paper, creased so many times it looked like it might tear under its own history. She placed it on the table between them but didn't let go. Before you decide what to do with me, she said, you should know what you actually won. He frowned. I didn't win you. She met his gaze steadily. No, you didn't, but they thought you did. She unfolded the paper. His breath caught. The markings were unmistakable. Survey lines, boundary notations, signatures he recognized. It was a land claim. Not just any land. The valley to the north. The one men had been whispering about for years. Timber, water, grazing rights, a place worth killing over. They married me to hide it, she said softly. My father's land. They couldn't take it outright, so they took me. He stared at the paper, then back at her. Why keep it secret? Because secrets are the only thing a woman like me can own. The fire cracked loudly, punctuating the truth of it. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, eyes never leaving the document. They gambled you away because they thought you didn't matter, he said slowly. They gambled me away because they thought I'd never tell, she corrected. He looked at her then with something like awe, and something like shame. All the years men had torn at each other for power, for land, for pride, while she'd stood quietly in the corner holding the key. You could leave, he said. Take this and disappear. She shook her head. Running only works until someone catches up. And staying? He asked. Her gaze didn't waver. Staying works if the right person stands with you. The weight of that settled heavily between them. Not a demand, not a plea, but an offering. He realized then that the poker table hadn't changed her life. It had changed his. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls, but inside, something steady began to take shape. Dangerous, fragile, and impossible to ignore. Morning came pale and cold, light slipping through the frost-edged window like it was unsure it belonged there. He was already awake when she stirred, sitting at the table with the folded land claim spread out before him. He hadn't slept much. Some truths were too loud to let a man rest. She rose quietly, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. For a moment, she simply watched him, the way one watches a fire to see if it will warm or burn. You didn't try to take it, she said. He looked up. Wasn't mine to take. A silence followed, heavier than the one the night before. Outside, the mountain breathed, wind through pine, snow shifting its weight. He folded the paper carefully and slid it back toward her. They'll come looking, he said. Once they realize you're gone. I know. And when they do, he continued, meeting her eyes, they won't ask polite questions. She nodded. They never do. He stood and pulled on his coat. Then we won't wait. By noon, the cabin no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a stand. He showed her where he kept supplies, how the trap lines ran, which trails only locals knew. She listened closely, asked sharp questions, remembered everything. Worthless people didn't learn like that. When the first riders appeared on the lower ridge, she saw them before he did. 3, she said calmly. Maybe 4. He followed her gaze and felt a grim satisfaction twist through him. She wasn't afraid, not frozen, not pleading. Ready. They'll try words first, he said. They always do, she replied. The men arrived just before dusk, horses steaming, faces hard with entitlement. The one in front dismounted slowly, eyes scanning the cabin, the rifle by the door, the way he stood slightly in front of her without touching her at all. We're here for what's ours, the man said. He didn't move. You're on my land. The man laughed. Bought and paid for last night. She stepped forward then, voice clear as winter air. You can't own what you stole. That changed things. Anger flared. Lies spilled fast. Claims of debts, of signatures, of a woman who didn't know her place. She let them talk. When they finished, she reached into her coat and held up the paper. This place, she said, belongs to my father. And now, to me. The men stared. One swore under his breath. He felt it then, the moment where the mountain chose a side. He stepped forward, placing his hand over hers, steady and deliberate. She's not alone, he said. And she's not leaving. The first shot rang out, wild and panicked. It hit nothing but air. The mountain man's answer was faster, cleaner. He fired once. Not to kill, but to end the argument. A horse reared. Another man dropped his weapon. Fear did what reason never could. They retreated in a storm of curses and promises, but none dared turn back. When the last echo faded, the world felt impossibly quiet. She exhaled slowly, like someone releasing a breath she'd been holding for years. Her hand was still in his. Neither pulled away. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, he replied simply. I did. Night fell again, but this time it didn't feel like a threat. They sat by the fire, closer now, the space between them finally honest. "They'll try again," she said. He nodded. "And next time, we'll be ready." She studied his face. The scars, the steadiness, the way he never spoke more than he meant. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why stand with me?" He thought of the poker table, the laughter, the word worthless tossed like a bone to a dog. He thought of her hands, rough and capable, holding a future no one thought she deserved. "Because you were never the thing they gambled," he said. "You were the one they feared." Something in her eyes broke open then, not weakness but relief. She leaned into him, just slightly, enough to say yes without words. Outside, the mountain held firm. Inside the cabin, a different kind of claim had been made, one not written on paper, not won by chance, but earned in firelight and truth. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being kept. She was being chosen.